Were your tech issues because you tried using Google Chrome? Because my Google Chrome doesn't do this.
Hello, everyone.
Our stream is live. Hello. Alex started talking as soon as we got live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to NunPub. You are here for a panel on playtesting TTRPGs. So not board games, not card games. Maybe some elements from that. TTRPGs, tabletop role-playing games. I'm Jess. My pronouns are she, they. I'm one half of Wannabe Games. I make tabletop role-playing games primarily. And we can all one by one introduce ourselves.
Oh, you got to pass it.
Oh, pass.
Yeah.
Alex, you can go next.
All right, I'm the other half of Wannabe Games. I'm Alex Sprague. I make the same things, basically. Tim, if you want to go.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Timothy Grant. I am a role-play game designer, but I dabble with like some board game stuff. I just put out Venture Society, which should be coming out very soon. We're waiting on some test materials. I mean, the first samples of it, and then we're just hitting a button to go live with it. Ryan?
Yeah, I'm Ryan, the one true Ryan Kahn, because Ryan Kahn is an incredibly common name. I am a game designer, again, like everyone else here, largely in the tabletop space. Currently working on a game called Bug Dish, which is about traveling bug chefs who compete in Iron Chef competitions. So it's like one part travelogue, one part Iron Chef competitions. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, though.
Yeah, so we're talking about playtesting, and I think that we should start off with a little bit of an introduction to like what does that mean and the importance of playtesting for TTRPGs specifically. So I know when like with board games especially, you really need to make sure the mechanics work, but it's a little bit different with role-playing games, I feel like, because there's also there's a human element at play that can change things way more than somebody playing a board game, a card game, because you're interacting with the story, you're interacting with the text, and then it's not just you interacting, it's a whole bunch of people kind of putting their fingers into this system and messing around with it. And I'm curious about what all of you have to say about maybe some of the differences, if you know any of the differences. I know, Tim, you said that you've done some board game design too.
Yeah. So I mean, me personally, I think with role playing, some of the things that you have to look out for in playtesting and designing a role playing game is the emotions that could be at the table, right? Because the emotions, depending on what you're designing, could be a very big thing, especially in terms of like safety and things like that. And when we're playing board games, right, and designing board games, like we don't really have a lot of those factors in play.
Yeah, I've cried more at board games than TTRPGs.
Well, were they like 5-hour games though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's one big difference is board games have very prescriptive ways of how you can interact with the other players and with the game itself. I mean, that's the draw of it, right? Like you have these very precise interactions that create this really, on a good game, create really exciting moment-to-moment decisions and long-term decisions. With tabletop games, though, it's more like guidelines on how to interact, but there's so much more space to go outside of what the rules prescribe and also what the rules imply. And so I think that's where it gets a little bit fuzzy in the tabletop world, because we're trying to guide this kind of interaction, knowing well that people can go in very different directions with the same set of rules.
Kind of makes playtesting tricky in that way, because you can't ever completely prepare for like what are they going to do. I like that you called it like a guideline for interaction, because that really is kind of what the rule set is for. It's a guideline of interaction with each other and with the story that you're doing. And there's, I don't know, infinite elements. For me, that's always been, even when I play a game that's already been, it's been published, I can play like a D&D game, something that's been like hammered through a million times. And I'm still going to run into situations that were not called for in the rules, and I have to make up something on the fly, or I don't know the rule, I'm just going to guess. Like, we'll figure it out. So I think the next thing kind of on our list, we're gonna talk a little bit about what some of those finer points are when it comes to playtesting TTRPGs and our experiences doing it. I know, Ryan, you said you literally just yesterday playtested.
Yes.
You want to maybe talk about that a little bit, since I feel like you're probably the one who's playtested something the most recently out of the four of us then.
I do agree.
I've been playtesting a fair amount the last month or so. Last night, I was playtesting not Bugdish, a game called Telos Engine, which is like a game to summon an eldritch horror. And so you're performing this ritual by writing on playing cards and drawing your kind of elder sign as you play. Um, and I guess a lot of times when I'm sitting down to playtest, I'm kind of looking for vibes. Like I want the game to deliver a certain feeling. And so I think that, like, as I sit down, as I was describing the game last night, I was sharing like the actual pages because I felt like some of the mock-ups I've done help deliver the tone, help deliver the idea, the backdrop to what the game is, what I hope the game will be. And
Yeah,
then,
I feel like
yeah. Oh, go ahead. No.
I was gonna say I just feel like having I've done some testing for video games before, like what you're going for is so different, and the vibes are so much more important in TTRPGs because when it comes down to it, you kind of have someone able to push you in the right direction in a TTRPG. You don't have to necessarily follow the exact set of rules, and everyone can make decisions on the fly. Whereas if you're dealing with a mechanical thing, which is, board games or a video game, you have to really care about the other things, which is why I always say, like, I don't know, I kind of care less about play testing for balance and way more for play testing for does it get the feel right. Yeah.
I find, at least for the kinds of things that I design, balance isn't really a thing that I think about. Because I at least, like in games with a lot of combat, I think the balance really needs to be around, do all the people at the table feel like they can participate as much as they want to and in the way they want to? And that doesn't necessarily look like, a game where there's like a weird difficulty spike at a certain boss in like a video game, right? Or like controls that are fighting against you instead of empowering you.
Yeah, that's huge. You have to think about, like, when you're setting like the conditions for playtesting, like, what do I want out of this? You have to really consider, like, what kind of game do you want to make? What are your themes? Like, what is the vibe? That's huge. What is the vibe, which is so nebulous and hard to find? Like, oh, I want them to have a very serious time here at the table. I want them to really consider these factors because we're exploring, I don't know, the I was about to say something kind of deeply unserious, which was the Dadaism art movement, very deeply unserious. But maybe it is a serious game about Dadaism, and we're all supposed to be hoity-toity, artsy fartsy art critics. And if you get there at your table and they're all goofing off and making jokes, there's a disconnect here. So that's not what you want out of a TTRPG. It doesn't matter so much if, like, all the power is balanced. It matters if like you said, if the vibes are vibing. If
Yeah. I think a big part of that too is thinking about, like, when you're testing, where you're testing at, right? So if you're doing something that's more intimate and it's more about the emotions at the table or the connections between each other, then you probably want something that's a little more like a kitchen, right? Playtesting somewhere where, like, you can feel comfortable, but also know that it's quiet and you don't have the interruptions of everyone else around you. Like, playtesting at a convention, something that is very intimate, probably is not ideal because you're not going to get the same experience that you're looking for through the playtest.
Yeah, and there's been a weird thing that's happened to me quite a bit of people offering up like playtesting my game in order to break it. And they brag about being able to mechanically break games. I'm like, well, I don't really care. If that's how you play games, you probably won't really enjoy the stuff I make anyway.
Yeah.
And I think if I repeat something a lot when making games with Jess, it's that I'm always saying like, well, we can't really design around them being assholes. I'm sorry. Like that's just, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. And you just hope that they're not doing that.
Yeah, if you need a line in a rulebook saying, don't be a jerk to your friends, then probably the issue is larger than your rule set.
Yeah, that's from outside. There are all those outside factors that you can't control. And I think, Tim, you're like really right. There's a lot of reasons why playtesting at a convention, although I do think it's very useful to playtest at a convention, because you're probably going to be running your game at a convention to get it out there. And it's also a really valuable way to get a lot of feedback from people who you don't know. And I know that Unpub does a lot of like convention based playtesting. I've been a part of that with like I've play tested board games there and everything. That I feel like that's really valuable, and it's really valuable too as a game designer to go in and see those. But when you're at a convention, you're getting people who are paying money to be there. They are typically, unless you go to the Unpub convention, you're paying money to be there. They're there to be entertained by you for however many hours. They're a bunch of strangers. Maybe they don't even know each other. And that puts a lot of, it puts a lot of kind of scary unknown factors. Like, are they the target audience for your game? Because if my game is about being pretty princesses and I get somebody who's only played D&D their entire life, first of all, why did you come play my game? But maybe, I don't know. But like, are they going to be the right target audience? And you kind of have to like filter all those things out. Then there's the noise, people are tired, they're hangry, like whatever it is. And you kind of have to filter all of that out unless they're there specifically to play test your game. I would personally recommend for TTRPGs, unless you are in a space that's specifically there, like people know that they're there to play test a game. Maybe you have some other people who are kind of giving you some guidance. I would recommend instead play testing first and getting kind of things hammered down in a way with your friends or other designers who you are more familiar with and know and can kind of control that environment.
I think you bring up a good point too about like looking for playtesters. You don't know who's going to come to your playtest, but having a good description of what your game and the vibes are going to be in that game could be a good factor in getting the right people to test, right? So like if you have a silly game, just marking on there, this is going to be silly, or this is serious. This has very dark themes, just so everyone knows before they get into it, like, oh, this is what I'm going to expect going into this.
And if you can't figure that out, like that's something I think you should probably hammer down before you get to the playtesting side of things.
I mean, I think that's a lot about just setting appropriate expectations. Like when people know what's coming, it can help. It can help kind of smooth out those rough edges. Like I've playtested at a couple of conventions, and I've always made it explicit in the description, like this is a playtest. So like if you sit down at my table, you know that you're getting something that is not complete, that there might be some things that we just have to be like, okay, that doesn't work. We're throwing that out. We're doing it like this now. And I've had good experiences, but I think it was necessary to set that up so that people aren't expecting a nice, well-tuned product and being able to say like, oh, this is something in development.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know when I go to like any convention, I'll go through the event listing and just do Control F playtest and see what the weirdest thing I can find is. Because like I feel like you tend to find like a bunch of cool stuff that way. Whether or not it'll ever be released is always nebulous, but like that's what I want out of that experience anyway. Whereas I've done playtests where I'm like, if I was here to play a game, I would be upset because this was a bad time and this doesn't work, which is always my fear of bringing stuff to the table. Of if how I've written the game, it doesn't work, and you need me to explain every piece of it, I shouldn't even be playtesting it. I need to go back and edit myself first.
I think that's a good way to lead into like talking about playtesting in-house first, right? And making sure it makes sense with people that you feel comfortable with that can tell you like constructively, hey, I don't think this works. Maybe you should try something else. Maybe you should try this. And having that constructive criticism before like you bring it to a table and with strangers, right? And then get your heart broken, right?
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about the TTRPGs though is if something doesn't work, you have so much more flexibility as a designer because you can just kind of make just like a regular jam. You can just kind of make stuff up on the fly. There's literally nothing stopping you from doing that. You can literally just say like, "Oh, this doesn't work. Here, we're gonna switch to a coin flip for this," or "I'm just gonna kind of fudge this, and we're gonna skip over blah blah blah. We're gonna storyline it. We're gonna blah 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 it." Like for me, if I were playtesting a board game, I feel like I would have to, and I haven't done this except for in-house board game playtesting, or like being a playtester, but I feel like I would have to have so much control. Like, oh, if this doesn't work, I have plan B and plan C. You don't really that you don't really need to do that for a TTRPG. Hopefully you have a good instinct as you're designing a game because you're probably a game player too and you've been designing and you know the vibes and you can just kind of surf the vibe for that. But kind of like making sure that I still would recommend that you, before you bring it out to a general public, that you know more or less what the gameplay loop is, the main mechanics, kind of make sure that they work. And it's possible that it doesn't end up working because you and all of your friends who always play games, they're used to how you run things. You're comfortable with them. They're not like, how they react. And then you get somebody from outside of your group and they have a completely different play style. That's really valuable feedback for you. That's super valuable feedback for you. I don't think it's always necessary. I don't always think that playtesting. It's in-house playtesting, and then like what's the opposite of that?
Outhouse.
Outhouse playtesting.
That's a good. I like that. I'm gonna start using that.
I don't think that's always necessary. But if you're like hoping to be like a huge commercial success, yeah, you're probably gonna be there. But for me, I make weird indie games and honestly, they are very like, we do our in-house playtesting. We don't do outhouse playtesting. I don't. You can just keep it in-house, is what I'm saying. But that valuable feedback from outside can be super, super helpful if you're trying to design something for that purpose.
I think there's also maybe this is a topic for a little bit later, but just the idea of know what part of your game you're playtesting. You might be playtesting the whole thing, but if you're just playtesting this one small bit, the other stuff, like, you can just hand wave that, right? Or you can, even if it's like, it doesn't work right now, so here is a stand-in mechanic until I figure that part out, but I really want to focus on this particular interaction.
Yeah, I think when, like, my best example of this is when we were making Moonpunk. It's a powered by the Apocalypse game. So we didn't playtest that portion of the game, like the 2d6. Yeah, that works. We know it works. We don't need, like, we're not doing anything there. The other parts, then, we just focused in on and checked in to make sure those worked. Anything weird, we added in.
Do these moves make sense? Do people know what they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, do they get mostly it was a vibe check on those things.
Word of the day.
Because there's like, in that there's a pilot who about half their moves are references to either Han Solo or Cowboy Bebop. And like, if half the people get, the Star Wars, half people get the Cowboy Bebop. If you get none of it, I'm like, do they understand the move still? And turns out you can't find anyone in the world who doesn't know one of those things, so you're fine. But like, a lot of that was just kind of thinking like, are we being too insularly nerdy? And nope, not in this industry.
That's the truth.
Yeah. What would we recommend? Like, you are setting up your play test, you are getting things ready, and maybe you are testing a specific mechanic or the whole game. Like, what are we doing? How are we setting this up?
Can I start with, I think, the most important thing that not enough people do? Just to read the entire thing out loud, even to yourself, because I write in a way, and a lot of people write in a way, that once you start reading out loud, you go, wow, there's so many weird things I've said and so many mistakes. I should just tweak this a little, and it is so much better after that.
I second that motion, and then I would say read it again after you do it again.
Yeah.
I like that. And then I often, when I'm testing with people that I know well, I'll actually ask somebody else to just read the text.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've got a couple of the designer friends. So it's just like, yeah, you read it, and then like let's go with like your interpretation of it.
Zoe Allred commented, sometimes I read something out loud, but I wasn't listening to myself. Yes, that can be a problem. Alex and we design together. So one of us will read it and the other will listen. I am a teacher. So when I tell my students to write something, I tell them that they should read it out loud, hopefully to a partner. Now, they're teens, so they're very embarrassed about the things that they write. The other recommendation I give them is to read it into a recorder and play it back. Now, if you have a really long manuscript, that's going to be a lot of work. I personally find it very useful for editing purposes. Yes, it is editing. It is editing.
I think playtesting is just editing,
It is.
right? It's just editing
Yeah.
your ideas down to the point that they make sense to everyone, and hopefully are fun.
So in our notes, somebody made a list of the stages of a playtest. I'm not sure who put those in the notes, but would you like to explain what you mean by these stages?
I mean, yeah, I would, because I wrote it in. So like, I think of like rapid testing, right? As like, I have an idea for a thing and I want to test it right now before I even go forward, because if this is the core thing that is going to be a mechanic in my game, I don't want to design this whole thing around it and then it fall all apart in a playtest, right? So
Yeah.
let's play test it right now, see if it works, get going. Okay, this works. All right, we move forward. In-house testing with people if you have a design team, if you have people that you trust that you can play testing with them, then introducing it to other people that you are maybe just outside of your circle, right? Play testing with them and see what they think, right? Maybe you'll get a little more criticism from them than you would from your inner circle. And then blind testing, right? Giving it to someone and say, here, can you run this?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is probably the scariest part of playtesting, is giving someone the thing you made and say, hey, go play test and give me some feedback.
Honestly, that's scary even after you've done all of this and you publish your game and someone buys it. You're like, oh no, I hope you like it. I'm not here to help you.
I hope I did my job properly.
Yeah.
The terror sets in. And then I would say like the final stages, which is just like adjustments, those little things like it's really just the editing part. And like, does all of this make sense to a reader? Do I have to adjust the way I wrote it or said it so that everyone understands the rules as they are written?
Yeah, that's huge. Because when you are writing, just in general, you are writing to communicate something, and if you are not clear in what you've written, you've failed in that communication. You failed in your goal. And there are so many places where somebody can misunderstand something. It could be, again, like the general text. Sometimes you forget to write something super important about your game to explain, like, this happens, and hopefully you catch it. But you've been staring at this manuscript for days and days and days, months and months and months. Sometimes people do this for years, and maybe they change something down the road and they forget to edit back, or maybe they just never wrote in the first place because it's been living in their head for so long that they don't even realize they haven't put it on the page. I really do think that outside critique, as an indie designer, if you are just like a one person publishing house, you do everything, you really need to get somebody else's eyes on there. And I mean, again, I'm going to put this with a caveat. I actually don't think if you're just making a little game and you don't care, you don't care if it's an experiment, it's for fun, it's for you, you're not expecting to make like a bunch of money off of it or anything like that, there's nothing wrong with you just like doing something and putting it on itch. Like, I've done that. Like, I have games on there that I just wrote and blah 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 blah, poop, publish, done. Like, and that's fine because number one, I don't care if someone finds that I've made a mistake. I'm a human person, and I don't have a million years to go through this process with my game about gremlins, you know. Um, but if you are like maybe you're trying to pitch this game to a publishing house, or maybe you're hoping to sell it at like at conventions, you're hoping to get it into distribution, you maybe wanna get some extra eyes on it, at least one other pair of eyes, hopefully more.
I feel like that's kind of a question of scope and tone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it's supposed to be a really goofy game, you can get away with some things because it's like, yeah, this is absurd already. So if this doesn't quite make sense, it's like that's just part of the absurdity. But if you're trying to write like a heavy hitting like exploration of some like deep topic, like then it's like, okay, I really want to make sure that I am doing this topic justice.
Mm-hmm.
Am I getting the voice right? And that's what I think a lot more of like kind of when you start talking about like sensitivity consultants or cultural consultants, like that's where that starts getting even more important.
Absolutely.
Would we consider that playtesting? Like getting cultural consultants and stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good, like, is somebody reading through your game a form of playtesting?
I would say yes. If your intentions are to be safe in the game, it's absolutely like a part of playtesting, right? Because maybe you wrote it in a way that was insensitive, right? And you want to refine that and edit that to make sure that it's not insensitive.
I mean, yeah, one of the very first things I play tested, which was before I even considered it like game design, I was just messing around with an idea. I did not play safely, and there were things that I didn't prepare the table for, and so there were some like just heavy feelings at the end that people weren't prepared for, and we were sitting in a cafe playing this, so it was like kind of uncomfortable, and like that was a misstep on my part. I didn't prepare my players for what was in the game. I didn't consider how that would hit. And like it made for an unfortunate experience in the end. I think like the game itself was fine, but I didn't design with kind of the human in mind. Like, there are humans who are going to be playing this. How do I adequately prepare them for what this game is about?
That's huge, because when you do, like, if when you get to the point in this process where you're giving this to other people with no interaction from you whatsoever, you are putting yourself on the line. You're putting your integrity and who you are as a creator on the line in a lot of ways. And playtesting and getting that feedback, especially if you are dealing with deeper themes, it is a way to protect yourself as a designer too, making sure that you are presenting something, because once you present it, it's out there, and you can no longer edit this. Someone's going to read it and they're going to make judgments on you. I think that's true no matter what you're doing with writing. Anytime you're putting a text out there, you hit send a tweet, you're doing the same thing. So yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, on that note, I was wondering people's experiences on this of running play tests, and by the end of it realizing I made something bad. Maybe not like morally bad, but like this isn't a game. I shouldn't make this. And trying to find that line between am I going to ditch this idea, or can it be saved? Has everyone dealt with that? And I'll start, because my answer is yes. It's not even like a lot of my ideas are bad. That is I just shoot a lot at the wall though. And there's stuff where like I just realized pretty quickly running through the basic idea of the thought, like, oh, this isn't going to be fun at all. It's just a thing I like. And it's like you know, when do you know that happens? And also how how does everyone handle their sad emotions of, I had a bad idea and I spent like a good amount of time on it?
I like to prepare for that just by doing like the rapid testing, right? Because like I have a great idea that I think is great, but when you like go and sit down with it, you're like, oh, this isn't so great. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I try to avoid those negative feelings around it all just by doing the rapid testing and just like, hey, I got this cool idea that I think is cool. Oh, maybe everyone else does not think this is cool. Maybe I shouldn't do this, right? Or maybe this doesn't work.
I kind of think of it as part of my design process now, that like I will have a bunch of ideas and I will toss some out there, and some of them aren't going to work, but that is still valuable.
Mhm.
And almost every designer I've met has had like, oh yeah, I shoved that away, and then 3 years down the line, I was like, oh, I can reuse this one bit of it, and then that gets pulled back in, and sometimes, and if it goes well, it turns into something successful. That's like, oh, I wasn't able to capture it at the time because I was in a different design space. I was in conversation with different games, different designers, and things have changed. And so when I revisit some of these ideas, I'm like, oh no, there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
I like what Zoe already in the comments said too. You got to get the bad ideas out there to find the good. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we've all had really bad ideas. I love what Tim is saying about this rapid testing. It's something I think. Have you done this by yourself? Like you had this idea and you've just run through the math. How does that work for you?
I'll sit down and I'll be like, okay, this is a fun idea. Let's see. Like I really like this, and I think I would have fun with this, and I'll make a little play test of it, whether it's custom dice or whatever. And I'll sit down and play with it until I start running the numbers for it all, if it's mathematical, right? And I'll sit down and say, does this feel good? First of all, like, do I enjoy this? Or is this something that sounds good in my head and doesn't apply the way I thought it would, right? But that also could be a part of maybe it's not right for this. Like Ryan was saying, putting it on the shelf and then think about it later and see maybe if we can pull this out. Like maybe if it's mathematically sound, right? Just doesn't fit with what I want to do. It doesn't feel good. Maybe it's better for something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't throw away ideas. Oh, who was it? Oh, it was Elisa Teague. I watched a little talk that she was on a panel where she talked about a notebook that she had where she had a list of mechanic ideas and a list of theme ideas, and she just like wrote everything down. And if she came back to it and married those two ideas, she did. Oh, look, Tim's holding up
this iPad. This iPad. There are so many things in here that are both good and bad, but they're all in one spot, ready to pick through and find something later.
Absolutely. And you can take notes and annotate your notes on that. Like, oh, this didn't work because blah, blah, blah. And that, like, when you are doing your playtesting, making sure that you're taking notes on that. What worked, what didn't, why I'm throwing this away, why am I putting it on the back burner? All those things are important for you down the road. I mean, at least they're important for me, because if I go through something, 99% chance I'll forget about it in a day. But like having that record that you can go back and refer to is a huge tool.
I call it my recycling notebook. All of my mechanics I do not like or don't think they fit for something go into that notebook that I'm like, maybe I could test this later with something else.
I have my it's just called random ideas folder, and it's divided into like what the original game or intent was. So I have like this catalog, but I also have my, can we swear on this stream?
I already have.
Okay. Yeah, so I have my shit to play with pals folder, which is what I'm designing with one particular friend in mind. Like, oh yeah, this friend would really enjoy this.
Yeah, I've done that too. Like, this is just for Alex. I want to tell him about this blitzball mechanic.
Wow,
I would play a blitzball game. I've tried to design a blitzball game.
I mean,
You and Alex need to talk.
we need funding of several $1 million and our own company and just get out there. It's all I care about. It's the only reason I'm in this industry. Yeah, say I also, every time I go to a convention, I come back with so many things in the notepads portion of my phone because everyone there, like, I always feel bad hanging out with friends not in the industry when I'm like, man, that'd make a good game, and I start talking about it, and they're like, shut up. We're here to watch football, like not to listen to you talk about blitzball again. I'm like, but it's like kind of the same thing. But when I go to cons, they're like, I get so much the worst ideas in the world written down, and then every once in a while, 6 months later, I'll come out. I'm like, hey, check out this zine. They're like, did you made that into a thing? And then it's better than the ideas I make alone almost every time. I don't think I've ever come up with a solo idea that's better than something created by like a group consciousness, which is ironic because I kind of think that a lot of people's hands on a thing sometimes make it a little bland. But
well, I think that's when you're like designing by consensus. But just like running things by other people who like taste and design that you trust, getting feedback from them, even if you don't use, I think it's a Terry Pratchett quote that I cannot get word for word, but when somebody tells you what's wrong with your thing, they're usually right. And when someone tells you how to fix it, they're usually wrong.
Yeah.
That's a really good transition into setting up feedback. So when you are playtesting either in-house or you're doing a blind playtesting, you need to get feedback. Otherwise, they're just playing your game and it's not playtesting, it's just playing. So how are we setting up our feedback? What kinds of questions are we asking, etc.? I don't want to start.
I am also a teacher. And so Jess, you'll probably appreciate this. I do thorns and roses. Or like stars and squares or any number of things. It's like, what's something that really worked for you, and where did you feel some kind of tension or difficulty? Is usually how I start things.
Yeah, that's perfect. I do that in my own lesson plans, because lesson planning, we have a great advantage over non-teachers because we playtest things every day and in front of teenagers or children, and that can be, well, if you're not teaching adults, but you you have this captive audience for you, and like asking them, the roses and thorns, huge one, like getting where that tension and making sure that you have a very specific question so they can give you a specific answer. If you just sit there after a playtest, you say, well, what did you think? They're not going to tell you.
Worst question. Yeah.
They're not going to tell you anything. You need to give them a very specific question and plan those questions ahead of time. That doesn't mean you have to have every single question you're going to ask your playtesters ready to go, but having a couple specific questions will really, really enhance your playtest. And that's true. I think that's true whether you're playtesting a TTRPG or a board game. I think really nailing down those questions, and you can recycle them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
I think it really comes down. Sorry, Alex. It comes down to where you are in the stage of development of the game, right? Because those questions are going to change very drastically depending on where you are. So if it's very beginning, you may be looking for one component to test, and that's probably like whatever the core mechanic is, to see if how everyone feels about it. Did it feel good playing it? Did it feel like the experience I'm trying to give? Did you feel that? Excuse me. And really honing in on one thing at a time in the beginning, I think, is a really good way to go.
Yeah, when I've been paid for video game testing and stuff, it's not go play the game, right? Like that's never my like mission objective. They always say like get to level 15 as fast as you can. See how it feels, and then give us feedback. Or like you know, when the job's not as fun, they're like, here's $1,000 in microtransactions. Go see how that feels. Oh, was it like addictive enough? And if that's how $1 million companies are doing it, realize that you shouldn't be saying go play the game. It's let's test for X. Let's see if the encounters feel good. Let's see if the social stuff works, because we're not paying people to play test most of the time in our level of stuff. It's normally people who enjoy it, and that's why we tend to say go play the game, have fun with it. But if it's just for that, like, I don't know, like you have to really know the people playing it and expect them to get you really good feedback if it's that broad. Otherwise, I think you might want to be as awkward as it is, the like person perching and watching the game be played silently and see like where they struggle. Because I always think, other than vibes and stuff, mechanically, I'm looking for that friction point where they're not really sure how to continue on with the game. And if that happens, I'm always like, ugh, like that's what I want to see. Word for removed from the game that I can't think of. I was thinking of sanded out. That doesn't make sense. But I want that out of the game. And that's always hard to know because a lot of that's GM play style stuff. And yeah.
For me, oh, go ahead.
Oh, good.
I was going to say one of the most effective playtests I've ever, like, I've had 2 separate people playtest their game, where they used the same strategy, where they had 2 or 3 potential mechanics in mind, and they had us all sit down, and we just had one scene, just kind of gave us a run through. We're not starting from the beginning. We're playing this one scene, and they explained, we're going to do it this way, and then we're going to do it this way. Then we do it. And then they asked, which one felt better? Which one was faster? Which one was more confusing? Which one was blah, blah, blah. And we just chose one or the other, kind of like your optometrist with A or B. And when I had people do that as a playtester, I was like, this just makes so much sense when you're trying to nail down a mechanic. When you're trying to feel like which one is more thematic. I don't think there's not always going to be a case where it's going to be one or the other, but I have personally run into that a lot of times as a designer. Like, gosh, with my most recent game with the Coven of PS13, which originally all I did was me reading through it and talking with Alex and kind of playing through it a little bit before I posted it as a beta and published it as a beta, came back, kickstarted it, and changed a lot of the things because the math didn't work once you actually read into it, if they played a certain way. Like I had a lot of times where I was like, should it be this way or should it be this way? Which one feels better? Which one is capturing the vibe of being teenage witches in a high school? Like, which one? And those are the types of narrow questions that will get you the best feedback, in my opinion.
I think you kind of touched on the losing my voice. Touched on the point of what I wanted to make is making sure your feedback is clear in the beginning before you even start. Right? This is what I'm testing. This is what I'm looking for, and going from there.
What about?
Sorry.
I heard a pause, and I'm like ready to fill it. Go.
I think that another designer friend of mine, we were talking, Graham Gantz, recently kickstarted Under the Autumn Strangely. Incredible game. But was saying that when you're playtesting, and not at a con necessarily, but when you're playtesting, like, your job isn't to entertain, right? Like, if I'm bringing something to the table, it's like, this is, like, I'm working on this right now. You may not, like, the game itself may not be fun, and that's okay. Like, that's not my purpose right now. My purpose is to figure out what I need to improve, what I need to change, what I need to get rid of. Like, it's just a different thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm not saying that when those GMs sat down with me and were running through scene by scene, if that was fun. It was not. It wasn't fun. But I knew what my purpose was as a playtester. Like I knew I was here to run through this and see what worked. Um and I knew that like I trusted those because I was actually a player in their games. One of them was just playtesting for our home game. It was never meant to be published. And one was playtesting a game that would be published. But I trusted them as designers and I trusted that after we did this boring stuff, we could do something fun. um I would not recommend doing that necessarily at a convention where you're just like, we're gonna play this one scene and that's it. If I am there like as a just a regular convention goer, I kind of do want to play a full game. But again, if you were in a space like in the pub playtesting space, like not necessarily what you have to be doing. Like we said at the beginning, managing those expectations.
Yeah, I like to. I mean, I now have friends who like. It's not uncommon for me like, hey, there's something I want to test out, and then it's like that's what we're doing for the evening. So like, we'll usually like get some food and like we'll make a charcuterie board, and then so it's like it's the evening. Like this is just a thing we're doing. Like we hang out and we talk about games and game design, and then we end up playing a bit of a game, and then just talking and hanging out. So it's like this is just like a thing to do. It's a thing that we do when we hang out.
So I got a question. A lot of RPGs are played online. What do you think about playtesting TTRPGs online versus in person? Oh, so I've done both. And for me, like I've been a playtester in both ways. And I prefer an in-person playtest because you can see what their faces look like and there's someone right here and it's so much easier to ask questions. Uh, I really like being able to read the players as they're playing is going to tell you so much that they might not even realize for themselves, or they might be a little afraid to tell you because it is kind of scary to give negative feedback. But if you can see their face, if you can see their body language, and you're a person who can read those things, I think that those cues are really, really helpful to me as a person who can read body language and facial expressions.
I felt like when I've playtested online, like been a playtester, I'm so much less likely to give negative feedback because I can't see the person and I feel like, oh, I'm anonymously kind of just, like saying bad things about these things. And I'm like, maybe I'll fill out a form later if they give me a form. But like in person, I can like soften the blow a little in a way I don't feel like I'm very good at not in person. And I don't know if that's just a me thing, but like I've just never never been good at giving like feedback on an online game as well. And I think it's also because I'm bad at engaging in a online game as much. It feels a little disconnected for me, so I always have trouble wanting to be like, oh, that might have been the fault of a certain game and not the fact that I get distracted in my own home slightly.
I think you both brought up really good points, right? It really just comes down to each individual, and it's everyone too, right? Not just you as a playtester or the person running the playtest, but everyone playtesting is all individual as well. So like you're going to have that mixed experience. So you never know if someone isn't understanding something because they don't know how to interact online. To say, hey, like not wanting to talk over people. There's a lot of things that could come into play because if you're playing over Zoom or Discord, sometimes your voice will drown out the voice of someone else, and then you feel like you weren't heard. So how do how do you get around some of those things is a good way to think about it. But I do agree, in person for me works better. I'm very good at reading body language myself, and sometimes I have a hard time seeing what that body language is of the playtesters. How are they feeling about something? But then also, I can't tell if they're paying attention to something else in the house, or if they're paying attention to me, or if that's how they pay attention. Do they do something else to pay attention, right?
I think one thing that I've noticed about my own design is now I think explicitly, like, is this game meant to be played in person, or is it meant to be played online, or am I agnostic to that? And like, I don't like, I want both to be an option, because I mean, the truth is now, like, most of the games I play are online because the people I know and the people I want to game with are wildly spread out. But like, a friend of mine is designing a game which involves stacking dice. So that's very much like this is designed to be played in person. I mean, I guess you could go on like Tabletop Simulator since there's a bit of a physics engine there, but like it's clearly designed with the intent of playing in person. But I think a lot of more kind of like trad or adventure games, like, yeah, you know what, a lot of people are playing online, so I want to design with the online experience in mind. And so I find, at least for me, like, I accept the truth of people playing online. It's just part of how people play games now. And so I see value in the online version or online playtesting, because like, yeah, this is how people are actually going to do it. And so this is like an authentic sort of like situation.
There are some great things you can do online as playtesting that you can't really do in person. Number one, you can really easily record everybody and the whole thing and go back and rewatch it. And you can also facilitate anonymous feedback better, like sending out a Google form and collecting that information. You can ask people more privately, like you can send them a message, which you can do in person too, but it's just like a little easier to do that. You can have a side chat going where people are like, during somebody is engaging with the mechanics or with the story, somebody else could be typing a message to you asking a question, and you can kind of balance a lot of those things that you can't really do as easily in person. Your attention, because you're in a space where there's text comments and there's spoken comments. You can kind of divide your attention better as a playtester. And you can also, I feel like, be the fly on the wall if you are like giving this to a group of people to play while you're not facilitating, or you're not a player. And it's easier for you to kind of like turn off your camera and just listen, rather than like if you're standing over somebody over a table and watching them play, which is a little awkward.
I would recommend, like, if you, whether you're doing it online or in person, to have another person with you that can take notes along the way. If you can't record it for whatever reason, if someone doesn't give that consent to be recorded, maybe just having someone write it down, because sometimes, especially when you're playtesting, you don't catch all the things that are said at the table sometimes, and it's easier to have someone else that can write all those things down so you can review later.
Absolutely. Okay, we're in the last couple minutes, and there's a huge thing that we've touched on but we haven't really gotten into, which is, you got all the feedback. Some of it was negative. How do you handle your emotions? What do you do now? Like, you've done it.
My first step after a playtest that I'm not happy with is I've got a couple of people who I can go and just moan to. Like, I'm cranky right now, and so I'm going to say a bunch of stuff that I don't really mean. I need to go eat something. I need to go sleep. And then I usually give myself a day at least. Like, today is because I play tested last night. So today's like, I'm just going to like sit with this for a while. And then tomorrow I'm going to spend some time looking at the game and thinking about like, okay, what do I want to change?
Yeah, I can't speak for board game designers as much, but for me, what I have a TTRPG, especially if I'm also GMing for this, there's a lot of emotions that are connected to me because it's my story. This is a world I've created, and you said something bad about it. And yeah, I asked you what you felt, but you're saying something bad about what I did. That can be really, really tough. And you have to prepare for that. I love having an emotional support nerd, as MF Terrific said.
This is a title I was given a few years ago at a convention as an emotional support nerd, and I love the term.
So funny.
Much like Ryan, something I'll do is I'll go do something like play the guitar, or I'll do something that I'll play a puzzle, or I will step away from the design and forget about it for a bit to just let myself decompress from it. And then once it's time to like really like thinking about it again, that might not be for a week later for me, only because I want to step away from it for a minute, whether it was a good playtest or a bad playtest. Because then I can really like objectively look at it myself and say, okay, what was good about this and what was bad about it.
I have another thing I add into my my looking at stuff, which is we have a local game designers group we go to, and sometimes when I get bad feedback from specific people, I think, does this person like anything I've made? And also, do they like this type of game? And there's a friend of mine who hates all PBTA stuff, doesn't like it. And then when I get bad feedback from him, I'm like, oh yeah, well, you don't like this, so I throw it out. And there's a little bit of you that has to remember, people don't like everything. Hopefully, hopefully you're playtesting with people who are gonna kind of like the stuff they're doing. But if it's like just, oh yeah, this was bad and it was horrible, sometimes, without getting too much of a barrier, you have to think, oh, do I need this feedback at all? And can I just kind of throw it in the trash? And sometimes the answer is yes, and you have to remember that because you're making something weird and new, and not
I think
everyone
that's actually
will like that.
That's like a really big part of design is taking that feedback and be like, this is valuable. This might be valuable to someone else, or if I had different design goals.
Mhm.
But there's this big act of like, I know what I want to create. And so I need to take that feedback and try and figure out how do I continue to create the thing I want to create, take into account like some of this stuff.
Yeah, not everyone's gonna like what you did, and you can never make a perfect game. And at some point, if you're stuck in playtesting hell, you have to just let it go. You have to like just publish it. No one there's no police officer out there telling you no, you can't do it. You can just publish it. And I think for like a lot of the indie game designers I know, like we're kind of like this. We're a community. We talk about our games together. We play test our games together. The feedback I'm getting and giving as a game designer is different than somebody who just plays the games too. So considering those things as well, um, people have different design philosophies for sure in the indie TTRPG community,
Mhm.
and like just making sure that you're aware of that, kind of like what Alex was saying there too.
Yeah, because there's definitely games you can make that game designers love, and no one else ever will. And that is a risk of when you're playtesting with game design people. And I wonder if too many of us are too smelling our own stuff about that, because it sure happens sometimes.
I mean, I think that happens in any creative industry. I've seen some movies that I'm like, this was designed for other directors. This was not for me as an audience member, but here it is. I've seen those happen. Are there final thoughts, things we haven't gotten to or gotten a chance to say yet that we really wanted to?
There's a thing that we've touched on quite a bit, and I think it's just this idea of building a healthy community. And that community doesn't have to be just designers, but like having friends who are down to just play, like to test play something, or having people that you can go to whose like opinions you trust, or something like I've got a friend like if I need a pep talk, I go to this friend. If I need someone to really like dig down into the mechanics, I go to this other friend. And just like building a community of people who want to play games, test games, who are just happy to like do a thing together and have a good time, even if the game isn't polished. I think the community piece is just super, super important.
Mhm.
when we
Agreed.
make role-playing games, they're even if you're designing a solo game, it's still a very communicative idea. You're at least
Yeah.
communicating player and author, at least. Other final thoughts?
Now, shall we do the wrap up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, NunPub. Thanks, Heather, for setting this up. Really, really happy to be on this panel. I'm Jess Geyer. You can find my games at wannabegames.com or on itch or DriveThruRPG under Wannabe Games. And that's it for me.
I am Alex Sprague, the other half Wannabe Games. We have for Zine Quest in 3 days a thing kickstarting. It is the Steamboat Willie solo game where you live through the life of a cartoon character trying to decide what their future will be before 95 years are up, and you are no longer your own.
I'm Timothy Grant, and you can find me on most platforms as Timothy Grant ESN, Emotional Support Nerd. And you could find Venture Society over at ninthlevelgames.com.
And I am Ryan Kahn. You can find my stuff on itch at rcon.itch.io. It'll redirect you to the one true Ryan Kahn, but that's too many letters, so save your keystrokes. It's not necessary. rcon.itch.io.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of the panels, and maybe see you in a playtest soon. Bye.
Bye.